I always imagined that peace would sound like this: water brushing against the dock, morning birds trading secrets in the trees, and the distant hum of a fishing boat drifting across the lake. For the first time in over a decade, I had carved out a space where I could hear myself think. Lake Chelan wasn't just a location, it was my reward, my reset. After years in Seattle's chaos, building structures for other people's dreams, I'd finally constructed my own. I built the house from scratch, designed every corner, poured my own concrete samples, chose reclaimed wood with more soul than most people I knew. It wasn't massive, but it breathed with intention. My intention, it was supposed to be mine, only mine. That Friday afternoon, I was working on a sketch in the sunroom, humming absent-mindedly, when I heard tires crunch over the gravel driveway. I looked up, expecting a delivery van or maybe the neighbor's landscaper. Instead, it was my parents' SUV, packed full. A second later, Elowin's minivan pulled in behind them. I blinked. Luggage, grocery bags, a stroller. They were unloading like they were checking into a hotel. "Surprise!" Mom called out, waving cheerfully. Dad was already carrying a cooler to the porch. Elowin emerged, unbuckling her two kids with one hand and clutching a Target bag with the other. The kids, Zinnia and Odelia, bolted toward the house like they knew the layout, like they belonged. I stepped outside. "What's going on?" Mom laughed. "Don't look so confused, honey. We thought we'd come up for a long weekend, maybe longer. You said it'd be nice to have family here, and your dad needs some fresh air, don't you, Clayton?" Dad grunted something affirming and disappeared into my den. Elowin handed me a Tupperware of pasta salad. "Zinnia's been calling this Grandma's lake house since you sent that picture last month." I stared. "I didn't realize you meant staying here?" "I thought you were booking at the lodge down the hill." "Oh, come on, Seraphine," Mom said, already halfway to the kitchen. "We're family. You've got all this space and it's just you. We won't be any trouble." Over the next hour, I watched the house transform. Vera commandeered my kitchen, rearranging spices, tucking my favorite knives into drawers like they were clutter. Elowin unpacked the kids into the guest room, and then, without asking, took over my office for their school station. Dad connected the Bluetooth speaker and started playing some old jazz standard from his college years. I kept smiling. That's what polite daughters do. But inside, 1,000 questions were forming. That night, after dinner, Zinnia handed me a crayon drawing. It was a map of the house, complete with smiley faces. "This is Grandma's room," she said, pointing to the master bedroom. "And this is my secret fairy corner." She'd marked my walk-in closet. I managed a smile. "That's very creative, sweet pea." But I couldn't stop thinking about how long it had taken me to save for this place, how I'd spent 2 years sleeping on couches while I scraped together down payments. Every inch of this home had cost me something. Time, sacrifice, solitude. And now, I was a guest in my own space. That weekend, Elowin started posting on Instagram. Family summer at the lake was the theme. Photo after photo. The kids on the dock, Dad grilling, Mom reading in my hammock. I wasn't tagged in any of them, not once. My name was absent, even from the captions. My studio became Zinnia's coloring nook. My label maker, my planners, gone or moved. Someone had even changed the setting on my coffee machine. "They're not visiting," I murmured to myself while brushing my teeth on Sunday night. "They're transitioning." On Monday, I stayed late on the dock, hoping they'd all go to bed early. The night was warm. The lake shimmered under the porch lights, and I brought out a glass of red wine to chase the cold thought that had been hanging behind my eyes. Then I heard Mom's voice. She was on the phone, standing just beyond the patio curtain. "Of course, it's perfect," she was saying. "She built it for herself, but what's hers is ours. She won't fight it. She never does." I didn't move. I didn't blink. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass, not enough to break it, but close. That was the moment I realized I wasn't hosting my family. I was being slowly erased. The next morning, I woke up before the birds did. The house, still dark and still, held a strange weight, like it knew something had shifted, but no one had acknowledged it yet. I lingered on the edge of my bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling and replaying the words I'd heard Mom say the night before. She built it for herself, but what's hers is ours. That sentence kept ricocheting in my head like a rogue pinball, and it wasn't just the words, it was the certainty in her tone. Like the decision had already been made, and I was the last to be told. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed clarity before confrontation. I moved quietly through the kitchen, making coffee. The scent filled the space that now felt slightly tainted. I took my mug to the patio and watched the lake shimmer in the early light. Something my grandmother used to say came to mind. Don't mistake my silence for agreement. It played like a drumbeat in my chest. Around mid-morning, I was on a Zoom call with a design client, trying to refocus on normalcy. My headset crackled briefly as someone knocked at the front door. I gestured for the client to hold on and walked over, assuming it was a neighbor or mail drop. It wasn't. A man in a navy polo and khakis stood with a clipboard and a neutral smile. Delivery for Seraphine Marlowe. I took the envelope, signed, and thanked him. As soon as the door shut, I saw the return address, a law office based 2 counties over. My stomach sank. Back at my desk, I opened the envelope carefully. Legal formatting. Black ink. My name in bold at the top, followed by Notice of Co-Ownership Deed Proposal. It went on to detail a new arrangement, drafted and co-signed by my mother, along with my forged signature, petitioning the county to formalize shared ownership between myself and the Kincaid Family Trust. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel the pressure behind my ears. The document was even marked pending finalization, unless contested. I knew immediately what I was looking at. I've designed blueprints for decades, I murmured. I know what forged signatures look like. Fury was a quiet, cold burn in my chest. I called Elowen. She answered chipper. Hey, we were just about to take the kids down to the shoreline. I just received a legal notice. Did you know Mom filed paperwork to claim co-ownership of this house? A pause. Then a casual, yeah. She mentioned something. It's just paperwork, Seraphine. Don't freak out. I laughed once, sharp. It has my name forged on it. She probably just figured it'd be faster that way. She thinks it's safer for everyone if the house isn't only under your name. You know how she gets. Protect the family legacy and all that. Elowen, I said carefully, this isn't a birthday card she signed for me. This is my property. My legal name. She committed fraud. You're being dramatic. No. I was being clear. That evening, I retreated to the guest loft, needing space to breathe. I didn't want to eat dinner with them. I told them I was feeling unwell. I wasn't lying. Something in me felt fractured, like a bone bruised too many times now threatening to snap. I needed to process. I needed solitude. I needed anything that felt like it belonged to me again. I curled up with a book but couldn't focus. I reached for the tablet Vera had left charging in the den earlier that afternoon, intending to play something mindless. Instead, a notification blinked across the lock screen. Family chat. 3 new messages. I hesitated, then swiped. She's always been the odd one out, read one. Too stubborn for her own good, another said. We'll make this right for everyone else. The third one was the worst. This house was never meant for one person. It wasn't just Vera. It wasn't just Elowen. It was all of them. The word we dug under my skin like a tick. I set the tablet down carefully, as if it were made of glass. My throat tightened, not with tears, but with the sharp sting of clarity. They weren't confused. They weren't overstepping. They were coordinated. They believed they were correcting a mistake, that mistake being me. Later that night, I sat at the breakfast nook, alone, with my sketchpad open. I didn't draw floor plans or window arches. I wrote. It was something I hadn't done in years, just thoughts, unfiltered. I wrote about being 8 years old, watching Elowen get the bigger bedroom because she needed space for school, while I slept on the pullout. I wrote about being 17, when Mom told me not to apply to that summer internship out of state because it was too far to babysit your sister's kids. And now? Now they were forging my name on deeds and calling it family planning. I capped the pen, stared at the page, and wrote 2 words in big block letters: document everything. The next morning, my phone dinged. New email. Follow up on co-ownership deed filing. The sender was another real estate lawyer, one I'd never contacted. They weren't just settling in, they were settling the score, with me as the collateral. I needed air, not just oxygen, but space. Space away from the thick politeness that had settled like fog in my home. Away from the smiles that said "I love you," while the hands scribbled lies across legal documents. So I drove. No destination, no playlist, just the road curling around Lake Chelan, and my thoughts rattling louder than the tires. Eventually, I pulled into a small parking lot next to a lakeside cafe I hadn't been to in years. The kind of place that still smelled like vanilla syrup and burnt espresso, where the air hummed with gossip and the sound of ceramic mugs clinking on tabletops. It used to be my Aunt Gwendolyn's favorite spot, my father's older sister. She had the kind of voice that could both lull a child to sleep and shut down a loud room with a single sentence. She passed away 5 years ago. Liver failure, they said. But part of me always thought it was heartbreak. Some people die slowly, long before the body gives in. Inside, not much had changed. Same green paint chipping around the windows, same framed photos of founding friends of Chelan. One picture near the register caught my eye. A black and white snapshot of Aunt Gwen at a town fundraiser, holding a garden trowel and smiling in that tired, knowing way she had. Below it, a brass label read, "Legacy Contributor." I was still staring when a voice chimed behind me. "You're Gwendolyn's niece, aren't you?" I turned. The woman looked familiar, though older now, wrinkles carved by time and sun. "Linda," she said, extending a hand. "I ran the town committee with your aunt. She talked about you," I said, half honest. Gwen didn't talk about many people toward the end. We sat. I didn't plan on talking, but Linda had a way of drawing words out like thread from a needle. "She was a strong one," Linda said. "Did you know she owned the land north of here? About 12 acres, gifted by her husband. A real gem." I froze. "No, I didn't." She nodded slowly. "Didn't keep it long, though. Some family business, legal restructuring, trust talk. Her brother's wife, your mom, I assume, pushed for it, said it'd be better for the family to consolidate things." My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. She gave it up? Reluctantly. Gwen was tough, but when family pushes with enough sweet words and legal jargon, even steel bends. I felt nauseous. What happened to the land? Sold within a year. Nothing ever got built. It's still bare, like something's waiting. I left soon after, but her words echoed the whole drive back. This wasn't the first time Vera had maneuvered her way into someone else's deed. This wasn't impulsive. It was a strategy, rehearsed, perfected. If it happened once, it's a mistake, I said aloud. If it happened twice, it's a method. By the time I reached home, the sky had turned gray. Inside, the house buzzed with noise. The kids were watching cartoons, Mom was prepping lasagna, and Elowen scrolled through her phone like she wasn't in the middle of stealing someone's life. I walked past all of it and shut myself in my studio. I opened my laptop, opened a folder, created a new document. I began listing. Courier delivery date, Friday, 10:26 a.m. Forged signature, confirmed. See legal doc number 214. Elowen's phone response. It's just paperwork. Group chat screenshot. She's always been the odd one out. I saved it, then backed it up to cloud, then emailed it to myself with the subject line, timeline. I used to think keeping records was paranoia. But I was wrong. I pulled out my old sketch journal, one I hadn't used since college. I flipped past drawings of skylines, ceiling arches, and landscaping notes. On a blank page, I began to write, not in cursive, not like a diary, but like a statement. The following events occurred between May 10th and May 15th. All entries are first-hand observations. I stopped after a few paragraphs. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from direction. The next morning, I watched my family at breakfast. Elowin was laughing at something on her phone. Vera was arranging the kids' plates like she was setting up camp. My father was absent again. His silence now felt like complicity. They weren't a family anymore. They were a committee. And I was the dissenting vote. Later that day, I returned to my room and found something slipped under the door. A photograph. It was me, maybe 6 years old, holding hands with Aunt Gwen at a local park. I remembered that day. She had bought me a cherry popsicle and let me skip Sunday school. On the back, written in familiar, pointed script, "She gave up what was hers for us. So should you." I held the picture for a long time, the paper warming in my palm. And that was when I stopped mourning Gwen and started fighting for both of us. The following Saturday, I woke before the sun even stretched its arms across the lake. I was already dressed, my laptop open at the kitchen island, with legal pads stacked like bricks between me and the coffee machine. No more pretending, no more tiptoeing. I was documenting everything. I started at dawn and moved through the house like a ghost, logging every change, every sign of their creeping permanence. Vera's grocery receipts were stacked beside my spice rack. Elowin's planner sat open on the kitchen counter, filled with notes about playdates at the lake and deck yoga. My den had become a toy closet, and my design table now held finger paints. By 9 a.m., I was in a Zoom call with a property law advisor I'd found online. His voice was steady, unimpressed by my situation, but not surprised either. "You're describing an encroachment pattern," he said. "One of the oldest family power plays in real estate. They test small boundaries, wait for silence, then take bigger bites." "They've already forged a document," I told him. He didn't blink. "Then you document. Photos, timestamps. Be methodical. It's not about being emotional. It's about being undeniable." I wrote that down verbatim. "People show you who they are," he added. "Believe them the first time." I ended the call feeling less like a daughter and more like a defendant preparing her closing argument. Late that afternoon, I went to grab a water from the fridge when I noticed Vera's laptop still open on the dining room hutch. She'd gone to the store. Elowin was down by the lake with the kids. No one else was around. I hesitated for a breath, then stepped closer. I didn't have to dig far. On her desktop was a Zoom folder. Inside, a recently recorded meeting titled Kincaid Trust Review. Curiosity gave way to dread as I clicked play. Vera appeared on screen, sitting at my dining table. My table. Across from her, a local real estate attorney I vaguely recognized from a town mixer. "It's all about framing," Vera was saying. "She's emotional, unpredictable. She isolates herself. If it gets to court, we need her to look unstable." The attorney nodded like this was common strategy. "We'd need documentation of concern from other family members, just to show she's erratic, resistant to collaboration." "I can get that," Vera replied. "She's been uncooperative since we arrived." I clicked pause. My hands were cold, my mouth dry. They weren't planning to ask me. They were planning to erase me. I copied the file to a flash drive and encrypted it in a cloud folder I'd labeled Proof. That evening, needing to clear my head, I took a short trail walk up behind the property. A winding path led to an overlook with views of the lake and neighboring hills. I stayed until the sun dipped low and the mosquitoes grew brave. When I made my way back, I saw movement on the lawn. Then I saw the chairs. Rows and rows of rented white folding chairs had been arranged on my front lawn. A wooden banner stretched between two trees read, "Kincaid Legacy Gathering, Honoring 3 Generations." A catering van was parked by the garage. I recognized none of the people filtering in. I stood frozen, keys still in hand. Vera spotted me first. "Sweetheart, we thought you might be out for a while. It's just a picnic. Don't make it a thing." "Did you rent all this without asking me?" She smiled like I'd asked what time dinner was. "It's a family home, honey. These are our people." I turned to Elowin, who was laying out paper plates. "You knew about this?" She didn't even look up. "Of course, Mom's been planning it for weeks." "Did anyone ask me?" She finally met my eyes, face blank. "It's not just your house anymore." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just walked inside, grabbed my phone, and began taking photos of everything: the chairs, the banner, the food tables, even the guest count. Later that night, after the crowd had filtered out and the lights were dim, I called my lawyer. They used my land for an unauthorized event, I said. They're treating it like community property. I never gave consent. He exhaled heavily. You're going to need a full report, with images, dates, statements if you can get them. I looked out the window at the trampled grass and the discarded streamers tangled in the bushes. They don't hear soft, I whispered. Next time, they'll feel steel. Just past midnight, as I was locking up the kitchen, a ping echoed from my inbox. New email. Heirs Legacy Council meeting. RSVP requested. Subject line, Agenda Property Transition Discussion. They weren't trying to connect. They were strategizing. This wasn't just about memories, it was about power, and I was no longer stepping aside. I didn't respond to the RSVP. Not because I was uncertain, but because I finally knew where I stood. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hesitating. I was done playing along. So, while they gathered for their Heirs Legacy Council meeting, I chose my own battlefield, my inbox. I spent that Monday afternoon compiling records, the deed, the mortgage, every tax form with only my name on it. No noise, no theatrics, just facts. I drafted an email addressed to all relevant parties, Vera, Elowin, and 2 uncles I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, but who were clearly looped into this fantasy of shared property. My tone was surgical, emotionally neutral, legally specific. I attached copies of the original land purchase, my building permits, and a notarized affidavit from my former project manager verifying I funded every nail, beam, and window. I didn't send the message right away. I sat with it for a moment, rereading the subject line. Clarification of legal ownership, Marlowe property. Then I clicked send and closed my laptop. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just the calm before the storm. The next morning, I was midway through reviewing design revisions when the knock came, steady, deliberate. I peeked through the side window, gray suit, leather briefcase, no smile, definitely not a delivery guy. Seraphine Marlowe? He asked as I opened the door. I nodded. I'm here on behalf of Margaret Kincaid, family trust attorney. This is for you. He handed me a manila envelope and left without another word. Back at the dining table, I opened the envelope with the kind of composure that only comes when your body has already shifted into defense mode. Inside was a cover letter signed by Margaret, polite but firm. She was reviewing cooperative transfer options for legacy assets, it said. Then came the main document, a formal proposal to transition ownership of the property into a family trust. Retroactive language, phrases like consolidated legacy, shared stewardship, and the kicker, intentional communal residence. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an attempted override of reality. I called the attorney listed. When her assistant picked up, I asked a single question. Was this letter drafted with my consent? A pause. No, ma'am. This originated from the Kincaid Trust representatives. Then you tell Margaret this isn't a proposal. It's a declaration of war, dressed in civility. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. For a moment, I let the lake soothe me. But the peace didn't last. My phone vibrated with a notification from Elowin's social media. The caption read, Generations coming home. A carousel of smiling faces, Vera slicing cake under the pergola, Zinnia and Odelia playing by the dock, Dad reclined in my Adirondack chair, like he owned the lake. I swiped through, frame after frame. Every image was curated, warm, and completely devoid of one thing, me. The comment section buzzed. So beautiful. What a legacy. Nothing like family. Looks like you're finally back where you all belong. My name wasn't mentioned once. No tag, no credit, not even a hint of acknowledgement that I existed within those walls. They'd rewritten me out of my own house. I set the phone down without responding. Instead, I logged into my old design site and updated the blog, quietly, deliberately. I designed this home, bought this land, and built this life, alone. This is not a legacy. This is mine. No hashtags, no names, just truth, sitting in silence, waiting to sting. I went to bed early that night, emotionally spent but clear-eyed. The sky outside was bruised with sunset, the kind that makes you think of endings that don't apologize. Around 10:40 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my lawyer. "Seraphine, we need to talk. They've filed something with the county registrar. It's not just talk anymore." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Then I stood, grabbed my folder of documents, and walked it to the safe in my closet. I thought they were bluffing. Turns out, they were building a case, and I was already on trial. The morning I walked into my lawyer's office in downtown Chelan, it felt like stepping onto a different kind of battlefield. Gone were the lake breezes and soft light through my windows. In their place, fluorescent overheads, file folders stacked like trenches, and the kind of tension that came from truth about to become official. Ron, my attorney, didn't offer pleasantries, just a manila envelope. "They filed it yesterday," he said, sliding the papers toward me. "Civil suit, named plaintiffs, Vera and Estrellas Kincaid. The allegations, breach of familial trust, unjust enrichment, and, get this, legacy disruption." I didn't respond. I scanned the opening paragraph, feeling the edges of the world shift slightly beneath me. "They're trying to force a quiet title action," he continued. "A legal maneuver used when someone claims partial ownership without documentation but asserts long-term informal use. It's shady, but clever. If a judge buys into the idea that your home was ever meant to be shared, they can create a partition case." My voice didn't waver when I answered. "So this isn't a feud anymore. It's a legal war." The next section of the complaint detailed supposed evidence of joint ownership, photos of family holidays at the lake, a handful of old text messages where I said things like, "Come up any time," and "You'll always have space here." Elwin had added a sworn declaration that said, "This home was always intended to be a shared retirement property." Seraphine often told me she wanted the family to enjoy it in old age. She never heard those words from me. The complaint mentioned financial and emotional contributions. Elwin babysitting while I traveled for work, Dad helping repaint the dock one summer. They claimed this amounted to material investment in a family estate. They weren't trying to take what I had built. They were rewriting the origin story. "They built a false history to fit their entitlement," I muttered, and then came the blow that made my stomach twist. Exhibit D, partial tax filings from the year I purchased the land, documents I hadn't looked at in years. They included estimated earnings, bank statements, and real estate transaction forms. The access codes had only been shared with one person, my father. He was the only one I trusted enough to help me scan my records that spring, back when I was exhausted and overwhelmed by zoning permits and supply chain delays. He had pulled the files from our shared archive and handed them over to build a case against me. I drove straight home without speaking a word the entire ride. That evening, I waited for breakfast. Dad always woke early, made oatmeal, and read the paper like nothing in the world could shake him. This time, I beat him to the kitchen. When he walked in, I didn't even look up from my coffee. "You handed them my financials," I said. He didn't sit. Just stood there like he hadn't expected a confrontation. "You wouldn't be where you are without what we gave up," he said. "What you gave up?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You gave up 2 weekends to help me paint. I gave up a decade of savings, my apartment, 3 jobs, and any hope of a social life." He didn't answer. I didn't expect him to. That night, I didn't sleep. I worked. Every file, every photograph, every note, every screenshot, I uploaded it all to a secure cloud. I created folders, legal, timeline, statements, contradictions. I added encryption, double authentication. I even recorded a video message, my voice clear and unshaking. They broke something sacred, so I will use every law they taught me to rebuild it stronger, without them. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was procedural. At 1:43 a.m., my phone buzzed again. "Ron, they've submitted a request for a temporary injunction," he said. "They're trying to block you from selling or altering the property until the case is resolved." I leaned back in my chair, watching my screen reflect the calm but fortified face staring back at me. "They want to chain me to this house," I said, "while they dismantle it brick by brick." Ron exhaled. "What do you want to do next?" I didn't hesitate. "I've drawn my own lines now. Let's start." It started with a text, then another, then 7 more in the span of 10 minutes. I was sitting on the porch, trying to reset my breathing after a particularly tense morning with Vera when my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Most of the names were familiar, people I hadn't spoken to in years. A college roommate, an old coworker from Seattle, even Diane from my former church choir. Each message was some version of the same question. "Is this true?" I opened the attached link and stared at the screen. It was me. My voice, my face, my words, but not how I remembered them. "This place is mine. I don't care what anyone else needs." I blinked. No context, no lead-up, just that clipped, cold sentence posted on Facebook by a cousin I hadn't seen since our grandmother's funeral. I recognized the kitchen in the background. It was a conversation I vaguely recalled from months ago, in the heat of post-construction frustration, talking to Elowin about boundaries, about space. It had been private, half of it whispered between sips of coffee while her kids screamed in the background. Now it was viral, edited, weaponized. The comments were merciless. "She's an ingrate. Disrespectful daughter. She'll regret this when she's alone in that empty house." I tried to report the video, clicked every available option: misleading, harassing, impersonation. The platform's automated message blinked back. "This content does not violate our guidelines." Of course not. A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth can get its boots on. That evening, as I walked to the mailbox, I noticed the neighbor across the street, Helen, watering her begonias with more interest in me than the plants. She didn't wave, just nodded slowly, like she knew something about me now that I hadn't said aloud. I went inside without checking the mail. The following morning, a local paper showed up in my email, forwarded by a friend. Headline: "When Property Divides. Blood. A Chelan Family Legacy in Turmoil." The article didn't mention my name directly, but it didn't need to. A reclusive local designer finds herself at odds with her own family after decades of generational connection to Lake Chelan. It cited anonymous family sources and described me as defensive, withdrawn, and oddly territorial about a home long enjoyed by many. The piece went on to romanticize the idea of shared legacy and questioned whether modern individualism was destroying family roots. My lawyer's advice was clinical: don't engage, let it die. But silence now sounded too much like surrender. That afternoon, I doubled the security around my property, more cameras, motion sensors. I had the boundary lines restaked and called in a local surveyor to revalidate the official plat map. At breakfast, I passed Vera without speaking. She was slicing grapefruit like we weren't in litigation. She looked up. "Going somewhere?" I didn't look at her when I answered. "You wanted a war in the court of public opinion. Let's both see who bleeds first." She didn't respond, but the corners of her mouth twitched, like a poker player unsure if her hand had just been seen. That night, I finally sat down with my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark room as I began drafting a legal counterclaim: defamation, privacy invasion, and misuse of private media. Before I could finish, an email popped up from an address I hadn't seen in years: Lena Walker. We'd been friends in undergrad, lost touch over time. The subject line read, "I didn't know what to believe." Inside was a short message. "Until I saw this." She had attached a file. I opened it. The raw video, unedited, complete with Elowin's voice prompting me off screen. "It's like no one appreciates what you built, Sarah." And then my reply. "This place is mine. I've put everything into it. I just wish they'd stop treating it like a playground. Not selfish, not cold, honest." And Elowin, clear as day in the reflection of the microwave. They used my words against me. Now I'll use their silence against them. Monday morning hit differently. It wasn't nerves, it wasn't fear. It was the weight of everything finally being named out loud. in front of strangers who didn't know me, didn't know them. But who would decide if my home belonged to me or to the legacy they invented? The Chelan County Courthouse looked like something out of an old postcard. Modest brick, wide windows, an American flag barely moving in the wind. I walked through the doors alone. Vera, Astraeus, and Elowin were already inside with their lawyer, chatting like they were waiting for brunch seating instead of a judge. I kept my eyes forward, my breath steady. I wasn't raised to fight family, I reminded myself. I was forced to. Court was called into session at 10 a.m., sharp. The judge, an older man with a face like weathered stone, took his seat. He nodded at both sides. And then it began. Their lawyer stood first, with the smoothness of someone rehearsed. He pulled out a prepared statement and read it slowly. "My daughter," Astraeus had written, "has had every opportunity in life because of us. We supported her dreams, gave her space, helped her build, but she's chosen to live alone, with no family, no children, and no care for legacy." No one in the courtroom made a sound, except my heart. Each word landed like a slap. Each sentence, an echo of every time I'd been dismissed behind closed doors. Now it was public. Now it was formal. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Marlowe, would you like to respond?" My voice shook on the first word, but only the first. "Success without submission," I said, "isn't selfish. It's survival." I didn't elaborate. I didn't cry. I didn't look at my father. I just sat down. Ron, my lawyer, nodded at me and stood. "We'd like to submit an additional piece of evidence," he said, walking toward the media cart. Video captured via outdoor security camera on the defendant's property. He pressed play. The footage showed Vera and Elowin on my back patio 2 weeks ago. Vera's voice came through clearly. "She's not going to give in. If she doesn't, we frame her as unstable. No judge will side with a bitter single woman." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Elowin's eyes widened. Vera didn't flinch. The judge lifted one hand. "We'll take a 15-minute recess." Vera's attorney leaned over and whispered furiously. She waved him off. Outside the courtroom, I stood on the courthouse steps, letting the cold air bite at my skin. A woman from the local cafe walked past, paused, and said gently, "They forgot who built the house." I smiled, barely. They attacked, I thought. I defended, and I have nothing left to apologize for. After court, I didn't go home right away. I took a long drive around the lake, windows down, playlist off. Just the wind, the engine, and silence finally feeling like something I chose. When I did pull into my driveway near dusk, I saw her. Vera, waiting in her car at the edge of my property. Not in front of the door, but far enough away that I couldn't pretend she'd come to talk. I parked, stepped out, didn't say anything. She rolled her window down. Her voice wasn't sharp this time. It was low, heavy. "You just made a mistake you can't take back." I walked past her, didn't stop, didn't slow. But before I closed the door, I looked over my shoulder once. "So did you." I shut the door behind me. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was earned. And that was the last time I ever called her mom in my heart. A week after that courtroom moment with Vera, I found myself doing something I hadn't done since I moved in. I cleaned. Not a casual tidy-up, but a full purge. Every drawer, every cabinet, every surface that held a trace of them. It wasn't about hygiene. It was about reclaiming my own air. The sound of the vacuum drowned out the silence they had left behind. I scrubbed the floors like I was trying to wash out memory. Not because I was sad. Not anymore. I'd already mourned them. What I thought they were. This was something else. Something colder. Final. When I finally collapsed into a kitchen chair, hands raw and heart numb, my phone rang. Court again. They were back. With more. That afternoon in court, Vera's attorney stood with that familiar expression of polite contempt and announced, "Your Honor, we've come across a document that we believe reflects the original intent of the property's ownership." I leaned forward. He presented what looked like a scanned document printed in grayscale, purporting to be an informal agreement from 2018. The text claimed I had verbally and implicitly expressed my desire for the property to one day be part of the Kincaid family trust, that I had referred to the house as our legacy. My stomach turned. I recognized the paper stock. It was from an old notepad I'd used when taking design notes years ago, but the signature at the bottom? It wasn't mine, at least not mine from back then. It looked like my current signature, fluid, practiced. I hadn't signed like that in 2018. Ron looked at me. I gave a small nod. "Your Honor," he said, "we'd like to request a handwriting analysis. The signature style does not match the year in question." The judge studied the page. "That's a fair request." Vera sat still, her mouth tight. Elowyn avoided my gaze entirely. We broke for a recess, and that's when I saw her. Ava. She stood at the back of the courtroom, arms folded, her gaze steady. We hadn't spoken in over a year. The last time we met, it ended with too many things unsaid. Ron smiled. "We'd like to bring in a witness." Ava took the stand without flinching. "I'm Ava Sterling," she said, clear and measured. "I co-founded Marlowe Design with Seraphine. I helped finance her first project, and I can state, under oath, that Seraphine paid for her Chelan property entirely with her own funds. She deliberately kept the deed in her name. She was firm about it." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Ava didn't even blink. "Because she didn't trust her family not to treat her success like a communal pot." That landed harder than anything I'd said in months. After court, I caught Ava in the hallway. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know," she replied. "But I couldn't let them rewrite your life while you stood still." We sat on a bench by the vending machines, the kind of awkward peace only two people with shared scars can share. "You were never selfish," she added. "You were just outnumbered." That night I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't spiral. I wrote a new statement for the next hearing. Clear, unapologetic, free of emotion, but not void of power. I was no longer defending myself. I was exposing them. The following day, a new envelope arrived by certified mail. Another motion, this time requesting a full deed freeze. No selling, no borrowing, no alterations. Legal handcuffs designed to strangle me slowly. They didn't just want my house. They wanted me to have nowhere else to go. 2 weeks after Ava stood in court and pulled the rug from under Vera's false narrative, I stood barefoot in the living room, staring at the framed blueprint on my wall, the original, my first hand-drawn draft of the home I built. I ran my fingers across the parchment, tracing the lines, feeling each stroke like a scar I chose to carry. I didn't pace, I didn't rehearse, I just breathed. "You don't need to shout when you stand on the truth." That was the only line I had running through my head. The final hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m., and I arrived 10 minutes early, as always. Vera, Astrius, and Elowyn were already seated. Their attorney looked tired, or maybe just resigned. Ron adjusted his tie once and nodded at me without speaking. We didn't need words. We were ready. When the judge entered, the room shifted into silence. Not nervous silence, but something heavier, the kind of hush that precedes a door closing forever. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "The court finds the claims made by the plaintiffs to be unsubstantiated, circumstantial, and speculative at best. The alleged informal agreement lacks legal merit. Furthermore, the pattern of behavior demonstrated by the plaintiffs constitutes what this court considers emotional coercion disguised as family obligation." I didn't exhale. I listened. "The property in question, both the land and the dwelling, shall remain the sole legal possession of Seraphine Marlowe. The lawsuit is hereby dismissed." The gavel came down like a whisper. The courtroom didn't explode. There was no gasp, no shouting. But in my mind, it was thunder. A lifetime of being talked over, shamed into silence, gaslit into compliance, all of it cracked open and crumbled in the space between those last few sentences. "They tried to break you with words," Ron whispered as we stood. "You answered with law." I nodded once. "I built this house. Now I've rebuilt the truth." But Vera wasn't done. Not yet. Less than 5 minutes after the ruling, her attorney jumped up with a last-ditch filing, a motion claiming undue influence over ancestral land, arguing that part of the parcel had once belonged to Vera's great-uncle in the 1930s and that a moral inheritance had never been appropriately addressed. The judge didn't even glance at the paperwork. Too little, too late, and unsubstantiated, he said, tone clipped. Motion denied. Vera looked at me for the first time in weeks. Her eyes were glassy, but not wet, just empty. She had no script left to read from. I didn't smile. I just walked out of that courtroom like a woman who knew the ground beneath her was finally hers. That evening, back home, I opened a bottle of wine, not to celebrate, but to breathe. I sat at my laptop and drafted a simple post. My home is not a symbol of greed, it's a record of endurance. I didn't name names, I didn't include pictures, but within hours, the messages rolled in. Support. Quiet applause. Old colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins who once called me cold, now writing to say they never believed the rumors, but didn't know how to say so. The house was quiet that night, but it wasn't lonely. It was mine, in every sense of the word. 3 days later, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery. 5 words, handwritten in tight cursive. You may have won now. That was it. No name, no signature. But some wars don't end with verdicts. They just get quieter. I woke up to a silence I didn't recognize. It wasn't the suffocating kind that follows a slammed door or the hollow absence after someone storms out. It was gentler, settled. The house finally exhaled, and so did I. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't preparing for court, a deposition, or a counterattack. There were no urgent calls from Ron, no emails flagged important, just the creak of the floor under my bare feet and the soft hum of the refrigerator. I walked through every room slowly, fingertips grazing the walls, pausing by the window that once held Vera's garden clippings in mason jars. The ones she insisted brightened the space. They were gone now. So was she. I stood in the kitchen, looking out at the lake, and whispered to no one. I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed a life. By late morning, I was sorting mail at the counter when my phone vibrated. Voicemail. The contact read, Elowin's cell. I hesitated before pressing play. Hi, Aunt Sarah, Zinnia's voice said, small and rehearsed. Mom said we can't see you for a while, because you don't want us around. My hand tightened around the phone. She paused, then added in a whisper, But I do. Click. The line went dead, and so did the air around me. I sat down, opened my messaging app, typed a reply. That's not true. I miss you every day. I stared at the blinking cursor for what felt like forever, then hit backspace, deleted it. Instead, I grabbed my keys, walked down to the lake. The sun was high but mild, filtered through trees just beginning to turn amber. There was a spot near the shore where Zinnia used to collect stones for her fairy houses. She believed the smoother the stone, the more magic it held. I used to kneel with her there, pretending to be the keeper of wishes. Now the only thing left was the memory, and a few forgotten pebbles buried in the dirt. Sometimes protecting yourself, I murmured, means breaking the heart of someone innocent. A few days later, I stopped into the cafe downtown. I hadn't planned to, but my hands needed coffee, and my mind needed people who didn't look at me like a headline. I ordered my usual and turned toward the exit, when Elowin brushed past me. She didn't stop, didn't glance my way. The barista, who knew us both, gave me a sympathetic look and leaned in as she handed me my drink. They're saying you only sued because you were jealous, that you never forgave them for being normal. I blinked, then sipped. My name, I told her, is a story they can't rewrite, not here. At home, I sat in my studio and stared at a blank page. Then I started sketching again, not houses, not resorts, retreat spaces, soft corners for women who needed to rebuild, not because of war, but because of blood. An intern from Seattle had emailed me the week before, said she followed the case, admired my silence. Asked if I needed help on any future builds. I said yes. She arrived that afternoon, nervous but eager. I gave her a tour and pointed to an open plan on the table. You want to help? I said. Good. Start by listening, not fixing. That night, after dinner and a walk through the pine trail behind the house, I sat with my journal, the same one that held years of blueprints, boundary maps, and now court notes. On a clean page, I wrote just 3 words. Almost done grieving. Then the doorbell rang. A small envelope rested on the mat. No postage, no markings. Inside was a folded page. My father's handwriting. Chapter 3.